Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Benny's Bat section for Monday, May 9th. There's a big 14-game slate going on tonight, a lot of games that we have to talk about, so let's get right into it. The first game we're going to talk about is going to be the Detroit Tigers going up against the Washington Nationals. We got Steven Strasburg pitching for the Nationals. He has a 2.36 ERA right now, whip of only 1. Basically right-handed bats have actually done a little bit better against them over the course of the last few seasons. So that's probably the way that you want to attack them, which really isn't a great matchup for him here against this Detroit team, which has quite a few right-handed bats that they can, use to go up against them. A couple of the guys that kind of stand out based on the numbers: Miguel Cabrera with a 401 WOBA, 189 ISO score. He could be somebody in play. J.D. Martinez, 352, 224. Justin Upton, 349, 210. But again, I mean, Strasburg is a very good pitcher. He's been pretty much lights out so far to start the season here. So I don't know how many bats you really want to take against them. But like I said, right-handed bats do profile to do a little better against them. So I guess it would be a pretty decent spot for the right-handed bats. But I'm not really looking to use many, if any, of these guys today. Next one we can talk about, Anibal Sanchez is on the other side of this game. He has huge K upside. But at the same point in time, he's also been lit up quite a few times already this season. So, it's a little bit of a sticky situation for him. Even though right-handed bats have done better against them, a couple of the lefties here on Washington have actually put up some pretty decent numbers against them in their lifetime. Bryce Harper is obviously the guy that you really want to look at. 466 WOBA, 354 ISO score, 3 of 9 lifetime already against Anibal Sanchez. He hit 2 triples and a home run, so quite a few extra base hits that he does have. Another guy who's done pretty well against him is Daniel Murphy. 364 WOBA, 207 ISO. Murphy's off to a hot start this year, and he's 5 of 10 lifetime against Anibal Sanchez as well. So both of these lefties have hit Sanchez pretty hard, and I think both of these guys are in play and, guys that we should be looking at here today. Next game we can talk about is the Kansas City Royals going up against the New York Yankees. We got Ivan Nova pitching for the Yankees. Left-handed bats hit 312 against him last year with 8 home runs and 45 innings. So we really want to look at the left-handed bats. Nova has not really been good this year. He actually hasn't gotten past the 4th inning of any game that he's been in. He hasn't pitched more than 4 innings. I think he only has 1 or 2 starts. They had him coming out of the bullpen for 1 or 2 as well. But a couple guys that I think we can look at, left-handed bats doing well against them, and left-handed bats in Yankee Stadium are things that we like. So guys like Eric Hosmer are in play. Kendrys Morales as well. And if you have to choose one of those 2 first basemen, I actually like Morales a little more than I like Hosmer on DraftKings today. 355 WOBA for Morales, 230 ISO. Hosmer has a 382 WOBA with a 183 ISO. So either guy could be in play. I wouldn't mind seeing either one of them rolled out there. You could also look at a guy like Alex Gordon. I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Another left-handed bat, has a little bit of power. Again, is a little bit more boom and bust, but as a left-handed bat in Yankee Stadium here against a weak pitcher like Nova, who's really been getting lit up, so far this year, I think that these are some of the guys that we can look at. Any lefties on Kansas City, I think, are going to be in play today. On the other side of the game, we got Chris Young pitching for Kansas City. And Chris Young has been lights out against right-handed bats. So a guy like Starlin Castro, definitely not somebody you want to consider. But the Yankees are going to roll as many lefties as they can against them. Mark Teixeira is probably the best one based on the numbers. 381 WOBA, 304 ISO since the beginning of 2015 against right-handed pitching. At home, left-handed bat in Yankee Stadium, he does have some upside. So does catcher Brian McCann. You could probably look at a guy like Carlos Beltran, maybe a Brett Gardner. I mean, none of these guys have been playing well. The Yankee offense isn't all that good, but it is what it is. Those are the guys that we can look at and target. Definitely want lefties, not righties, against Chris Young. Next game we can talk about, we got Milwaukee at Miami. Let's see, we got Jose Fernandez pitching for Miami. Now, he's a guy who's averaging 14 strikeouts per 9 innings so far, which is just huge numbers to start the season. The problem is he hasn't gone past the 6th inning in any game that he's pitched. So while he has been lights out early on in the game to, basically everybody, righties and lefties, he's also given up a couple runs this year. He's got a high walk number. He's been giving up a lot of walks, so he is giving up a couple base runners. And again, he's going to be out of the game before the 7th inning starts anyway. So you're also going to get a couple innings out of a pretty weak bullpen. You want to look at lefty bats against Fernandez. So a guy like Alex Presley, if he's still, cheap as he was last week, if he's back up hitting in the 2-hole, probably somebody you want to look at. I don't know how many of these right-handed bats I really want to mess with. Ryan Braun's the one with the best numbers, obviously, but guys like Chris Carter not really on my radar today. Jonathan Villar, Jonathan Lucroy, the righties I'm kind of shying away from. Fernandez has been up and down and doesn't look as dominant as he has in the past, but he's not a bad pitcher, and he is at home in Miami where he has been very, very tough to hit. On the other side of this game, we got Willie Peralta pitching, and left-handed bats hit over 300 against them the last couple years, with a home run about every 6 or 7 innings, depending on the season. So left-handed bats definitely the way you want to go after this guy. Derek Dietrich, he's been hitting up towards the top of the order now with D. Gordon out, 382 WOBA, 241 ISO. Definitely think he's going to be in play, somebody that has some power as well as hitting for average. So definitely somebody I want to look at. You also got a guy like Christian Yelich, 370 WOBA, 153 ISO for him. Justin Bour, 359 WOBA, 246 ISO. These left-handed bats I definitely think are in a good spot against Peralta. And then you could also look at a guy like Giancarlo Stanton, 7 home runs in his last 12 games. He's just been hitting absolute laser beams against, righties and lefties. So I think he's somebody else that we can look at here in this game. Next game we can talk about, we got Oakland going up against Boston. And Sonny Gray's on the mound for Oakland, and he's actually been very good over the course of the last 2 seasons. Solid against right-handed bats, solid against left-handed bats. He did have 2 bad starts back-to-back, though, so I'm not sure if he's really right or 100%. I guess the lefties are a little bit better against him, so you'd probably want to look at some of the left-handed bats. David Ortiz being the guy that sticks out the most against right-handed pitching. 417 WOBA, 325 ISO, hit 2 home runs yesterday. He is 0 for 6 lifetime against Sonny Gray, though, so not really good, good numbers. Even though he profiles well, it hasn't really translated in real life here yet, so I don't know if I really want to go too heavy against him. On the other side of this game, we got Clay Buchholz, who's another guy that's kind of been up and down. Left-handed bats have been higher average against them. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs, but this Oakland team doesn't hit a ton of home runs either, so I don't really think that's a huge deal. I really like Josh Reddick. He's probably my favorite play here. 362 WOBA, 192 ISO. He's 9 of 14 lifetime against Buchholz, so I think that's another guy that we can kind of look at here. You also have some other guys that you can take a look at. Stephen Vogt has been somebody that's in play. Guys like Coco Crisp, maybe Billy Burns if he's up towards the top of the order. But, like I said, Reddick is probably my favorite guy. I'm not a huge fan of Buchholz, but I do think this is a somewhat decent spot for him. I'm not really looking for Oakland to light him up. Next game we can talk about is Pittsburgh going up against Cincinnati. We got Jonathan Neese, the left-hander, going up for Pittsburgh. Right-handed bats have been the way to go after him. 273 batting average, 140 whip last season. Gave up 16 home runs in 139 innings, which is about 1 every 9 innings, so nothing crazy there. I think if you're going to look for him, you got to look at some of these right-handed bats on Cincy. A guy like Suarez, 382 WOBA, 216 ISO. Zach Kozar, 375 WOBA, 211 ISO. And then Joey Votto, who's very good in lefty-on-lefty situations. He has a 405 WOBA, 178 ISO. So those are the 3 bats that I'm really kind of looking at on the Cincinnati team here. The game is in Cincy. It's a good hitter's ballpark, so I wouldn't mind having exposure to any of these 3. On the other side of this game, we got Dan Straley, and he's a guy that's like a stretched-out relief pitcher. He only goes about 6 innings, but he's actually been really good to start the year in the innings that he has pitched since they made him a starter. Andrew McCutchen is an interesting guy against them, righty on righty, 366 WOBA, 194 ISO. Jung Ho Kang is back, 360 WOBA, 179 ISO, so he's somebody else you can look at. And Sterling Marte actually has the best numbers against him lifetime so far, and he's got a 355 WOBA and 159 ISO. So I think all those guys could be in play for Pittsburgh. Again, it's a very good hitter's ballpark there in Cincinnati, a place where a lot of home runs get hit. So I wouldn't mind, or I wouldn't be surprised, I should say, if we see like 2 or 3 home runs get hit in this game. Next game we can talk about Chicago White Sox against the Texas Rangers. You got Colby Lewis. Left-handed bats usually have a higher average against Colby Lewis, but he's not lights out to righties either, so I think some of the righties could be in play. Jose Abreu, one of those righties that I would look at, 377 WOBA, 232 ISO score. Definitely think Abreu is somebody that you might want to have some exposure to. Adam Eaton, obviously the best lefty they have on that White Sox team. 360 Woba, 162 ISO. Not really a ton of upside, but a solid bat where you can find them cheap and in a lot of orders. $3,700 price range. I don't really hate him, and I think it's a pretty good matchup for him here today. On the other side of this game, we got Miguel Gonzalez pitching, and left-handed bats have been much better against him with an average like over 300 recently, but right-handed bats have been pretty good against him too. So this is a team that you can stack up. I think that, there's a good chance he's going to get lit up. With the left-handed bats doing well against them, the top of that Rangers order is going to be tough. You got Rougned Odor leading off, who's starting to heat up again. Nomar Mazara, who has a 429 Woba and a 237 ISO since being called up from the minor leagues this year. Guys like Fielder and Moreland. Moreland actually has, I think I'd rather take Moreland over Fielder here because he has more power upside. 368 Woba, 226 ISO. It's something I like to do. I know Fielder's hitting in the 3-hole. He's got the better lineup spot, but I feel like Moreland has more upside, can get you a bigger score in a tournament. Fielder's probably the better cash game play. He hasn't been hitting home runs lately, but he does, smash some doubles, get some RBIs, and score a couple runs here and there. So, if you want to go either way there, I don't mind it. But with both of them being first base, unfortunately, if you want to stack them up, you can only go one or the other. And then, like I said, with him not being all that great against right-handed bats either, you got guys like Adrian Beltre and maybe an Ian Desmond who you can throw in there to complete a stack. So I wouldn't mind going up against Miguel Gonzalez. This is the Miguel Gonzalez who used to pitch for Baltimore. Don't really think he's all that great of a pitcher. Definitely think he's somebody that you can target today. Next game we can talk about San Diego against the Chicago Cubs. We got John Lester pitching for the Cubs. And you know what? San Diego actually hits left-handed pitching better than they hit right-handed pitching. Guy like Matt Kemp, 365 Woba, 237 ISO against left-handed pitchers. Guy like Will Myers, 356 Woba, 134 ISO. He's actually 2 for 5 lifetime against Lester already with a double and a home run. So he has seen the ball and hit him pretty well. On the other side of this game, we got the rookie Vargas going up. 24-year-old kid from Mexico. It's his first full season in the majors. It's the 4th start that he's making. He's got a 1.10 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP. He's got 12 strikeouts in 16 innings, but he does have 9 base on balls. So he is giving up a lot of base runners. Whenever I see a guy who has an ERA lower than his WHIP, I always think, you know what, regression is coming soon for this guy. Because if he's giving up that many base runners and was, has managed to wiggle out of all those jams, sooner or later he's going to make a mistake pitch and somebody's going to take him yard. And the next thing you know, he's going to be down 3 or 4-0 in like the second inning of a game. When someone's going to have like a 3 or 4 or a grand slam or a 3-run home run off him. It's what happens. And I think today might be one of those days with the Chicago Cubs team. This order is pretty ridiculous. I want to look at the left-handed bats. So guys like Rizzo at 402 Woba, 288 ISO, definitely somebody in play. Probably my favorite play in this entire game. Also like Tommy La Stella, who's been playing really well. 390 Woba, 221 ISO as a middle infield option. So he's somebody else we can look at. And then Chris Bryant, 381 Woba, 212 ISO. He's a right-handed bat going up against Vargas, righty on righty. Again, Vargas has been pretty solid to start the season here, but we don't have a very long track record on this kid. Like I said, he's 24 years old. I know he's from Mexico. I think he pitched in the minor leagues for a year or so. I think he might have pitched in Mexico before that, but it's not like we have a long track record of success or anything to really look at here. All I know is, left-handed bats have done a little bit better against them in limited innings. So those are probably the guys that I want to go after. This Cubs lineup is pretty legit. There's a couple other left-handed bats. Guys like Zobrist, who's a switch hitter, and Hayward. There are some people that you can look at here, and I do think that they put up a couple runs today. Next game we got Baltimore going up against Minnesota. You got the stud rookie Jose Barrios that's going to be pitching for Minnesota here. Left-handed bats have actually done okay against them. He's been really tough on right-handed bats. I think right-handed bats are hitting like below 100 against them so far in limited innings. So I think the lefties would definitely be the way I want to attack them. That kind of points out a guy like Chris Davis as long as he's healthy. 405 Woba, 345 ISO for Davis. Somebody that just has a ton of power. Minnesota's not as good a hitter's park as Baltimore, so it's a little bit of a downgrade, but I'm not really worried. I mean, Davis is the kind of guy that has power that plays in any park, so it doesn't really matter. I think he could get a hold of one and, maybe come up with a home run today. Manny Machado is a great hitter in righty-on-righty situations, but as I said, so far in Barrios' short career, he's been pretty lights out the right-handed bat. So is Machado in play? Yes, especially on DraftKings where you can play him at shortstop or third base. I just don't think he has a ton of upside, though, so I don't think he's like the slam dunk shortstop or third base play of the day. But like I said, he's definitely somebody you can look at. On the other side of this game, we got Tyler Wilson. And, Wilson, looking back at his numbers, right-handed bats have actually done a little bit better against them. So reverse splits kind of guy, righty on righty, which is probably not a good thing against this Minnesota team because basically they got a whole bunch of right-handed bats that they're going to throw at him. But I do think that Wilson's been pretty solid. And this Minnesota team has been, striking out at a pretty good clip, not really putting up a lot of runs. They don't have a high batting average. So I don't think it's a particularly tough spot for him. He could be a cheaper salary-saving option that you can look at if you want to. One guy who I do like kind of stands out, Miguel Sano, 369 WOBA and a 226 ISO score in righty-on-righty situation since last season. So he might be somebody that's in play. It makes a little bit of sense. Next game we talk about is Cleveland against Houston. We got Corey Kluber going up against Houston here, and Mike Fiers on the other side for the Houston Astros. Now, Kluber's been lights out to right-handed bats, which is something that's going to be kind of tough for this Houston team. They do have the guys like Altuve, Correa, and Springer up towards the top of this order. But with that being said, like I said, Kluber has been very, very, very tough on right-handers. Left-handers is really the way you want to go after him. Left-handers have been hitting like 250, 260 against them over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. Right-handed bats, though, are down like below 200 or around the 200 mark. So I mean, basically, you probably want to look at the lefties. So that points out guys like maybe a Kobe Rasmus. He's been hitting in the cleanup spot. You got guys like Preston Tucker, pretty good left-handed bat. Jason Castro, maybe even a Luis Valbuena. But none of this is really like big-time upside guys that I'm like, jumping or chomping at the bit to put into my lineup. I actually think this is a pretty decent spot here for Kluber. I think his price is a little bit elevated, but I can see him walking away from this game with a bunch of strikeouts and a pretty big number at the end of the day. On the other side of the game, Mikey Fiers, he's been horrendous this year. Left-handed bats this year are hitting 337 against him. Right-handed bats are hitting 277. Now, it's a small sample size this season. It hasn't been going on that long, but he has already given up 8 home runs in only 35 innings, which is about a little over 1 every 4 innings, and is ridiculously bad. The left-handed bats have done much better against them over the course of his career. So guys like Jason Kipnis, 386 WOBA, 165 ISO, definitely in play. One of my favorite second base options today. Even Michael Brantley, who hasn't been a monster since he came back. The last couple games, he's starting to round back into form. This guy is one of the best. I would put him as a top 15 hitter in the league when he's right. 377 WOBA, 174 ISO number for Brantley against right-handed pitching. So again, I think he's somebody else that we can look at there. I like the lefties in that game for Cleveland more than I like anybody else. But like I said, Fiers has been horrendous to both sides of the plate this year. So I think you might even be able to stack them up. The game is in Houston, great hitters ballpark. We could see a couple home runs hit there, a bunch of runs getting scored. It's not the craziest idea as far as I'm concerned. Next game we're going to talk about, we got the New York Mets going up against the LA Dodgers. Steven Matz is on the mound for the Mets, and he was like an absolute stud in his last couple starts, actually. So far in 2015, he actually already pitched once against the Dodgers last year. 6 innings pitched, only 2 hits, no earned runs, struck out 8. So he had a really good game against this team. In his last 3 games this year, he's got 9, 12, and 9 strikeouts. So this is a guy that's starting to round back into form. Everybody on this Mets pitching staff is throwing the slider that basically nobody has been able to put in play. It's either getting him swinging strikes or foul balls. And Matz does have some big strikeout upside. He's got really, really good stuff. He's been really solid to start the year. He had a bad start in his first start and then came back with like 4 just monster lights out performances since then. So not really looking to go after him all that heavy. The one guy that does stand out, Kiki Hernandez, he's just so good against left-handed pitching. He did go 1 for 3 last year against Matz. So of the 2 hits that Matz gave up, Kiki did have one of them. I guess guys like Trace Thompson and Yasiel Puig and Yasmani Grandal, they all do well against left-handed pitching. So I guess you can look their way. But like I said, Matz has been dominant, especially in his last couple starts. So I'm not really looking to make this one of the spots to attack. We got 14 games on the slate, including 1 in Coors Field tonight. I just feel more comfortable taking bats from there than anything else. Would I look at Matz today? I got to look at his price. I think he's still reasonable, maybe 92 or 93,000. I definitely think he is somebody that is in play. He's put up 30 something points, I think twice in the 5 starts already this year. So not really looking at many of the bats on the Dodgers, but I think Matz is somebody in play for the Mets. On the other side, you got Scott Kazmir going up, and right-handed bats are the way you want to go after Kazmir. The Mets, after pounding out a ton of runs in like 4 or 5 games in a row, went kind of cold in that series against San Diego. So I'm not really looking to take big chances with this team. David Wright is the guy who hits left-handed pitching the best. 438 WOBA, 236 ISO. Probably be up in the 2 hole towards the top of that order, as long as he's in the lineup. He's probably the best guy. If you see Wilmer Flores getting a start today, 373 WOBA, 268 ISO, another guy that hits left-handed pitching well. Cespedes, even though he's a righty, actually does better in righty-on-righty situations. He's not great against left-handed pitching, but he's not bad either, so he would be somebody else that I think you can look at there. Next game we're going to talk about is one that everybody needs to pay attention to. So even if you weren't listening for the first 20 minutes or so of this video, Arizona plays against Colorado. So I don't care if you're playing cash games, if you're playing tournaments. I'm not saying you have to stack up everybody in this game, but having no exposure to this game is just not a smart idea. Ruby De La Rosa was supposed to pitch, but apparently they're calling Archie Bradley up for Arizona to pitch in this game. And it really makes little difference because you look at his numbers. He doesn't have a long track record in the majors, but you look at his numbers in the minors, and left-handed bats have really been the way you want to go at him, which is the same way we were going to go at Ruby De La Rosa anyway. So guys like Cargo are in play, 413 WOBA, 307 ISO at home in Coors Field. A guy like Charlie Blackmon, 353 WOBA, 179 ISO. You can look at guys like Gerardo Parra, Ben Paulson, if he gets in the lineup. Nolan Arenado, righty on righties, a very good pitcher. I think all these guys are in play. Anybody else who they might throw up there towards the top of the order that could get a 4th or 5th at bat for the Rockies. I think we got to look at all these guys here today. So definitely like the left-handed bats going up against Archie Bradley, who's pitching now. It's not De La Rosa. But again, like I said, left-handed bats hit both of those guys well, so it really doesn't change much of the analysis. On the other side of the game, we got Tyler Chatwood, another right-hander pitching for the Rockies. He's been actually pretty solid, but he's horrendous at home. His numbers at home are just – it doesn't even look like the same pitcher when you look at his home numbers against his away numbers. Goldie, definitely think he's in play, righty on righty. He mashes 401 WOBA, 242 ISO score. A guy like Brandon Drury, 369 WOBA, 272 ISO. David Peralta got the day off yesterday, and he hasn't been blowing up like a lot of people thought he was going to this year, but he's still been kind of solid. I still like him more as like a cash game play than a guy with big tournament upside. 387 WOBA for him, 218 ISO score. I think all those guys are in play. You could probably even look at a guy like Segura, who will probably be on top of the lineup. Maybe a Yasmani Tomas, depending on how they bat him, a Wellington Castillo, although we usually like him more against lefties. I think all these guys are going to be in play. Everybody in the Arizona and Colorado game, if you have lefties from Colorado in there, you get no complaints from me. Righties or lefties, I think are going to do well against them. Chatwood on the other side, although I think lefties are probably in a better spot. Maybe a guy like Peralta, like I said, especially for cash games. I expect a lot of runs to be scored in this game. I expect, exposure to this game to be the way to have a big roster tonight. So if you don't have any, I just kind of feel like you're playing with fire. I know it stinks. I mean, we talk about all 14 of these games, and when it comes down to it at the end, we could have just looked and said, oh, there's a game in Coors tonight. Let's have some exposure there and then round out the rest of the field. But, there's a reason why we say that is because more often than not, that winds up being a winning combination. Next game we can talk about, we got Tampa Bay going up against Seattle. King Felix is pitching for Tampa Bay. Left-handed bats are probably the way you want to try to attack him. But again, I mean, he's good. He hasn't been the lights-out King Felix that we've known from past years, but he's still been pretty solid this year, and he's not getting knocked around. So if you're going to tell me that you don't think he's been lights out and he hasn't been K-ing a lot of guys and you don't want to use him, I understand. But I also don't think that means this is a guy you want to target a ton of bats against. The best one is probably Corey Dickerson, 387 WOBA, 299 ISO score. But again, I mean, what does this guy really do? He either hits a home run for you or he gets you a 0. So, just kind of keep that in mind. I don't think Felix is a guy that I really want to attack. So I think you have softer spots here. It just doesn't make sense for me to pay up for Corey Dickerson. On the other side of this game, we got Matt Moore pitching. Right-handed bats last year had 315 against him with the 167 whip. And to be perfectly honest with you, he hasn't looked good so far this year. He got knocked around in his last start. He's had a couple decent outings as well, but I think that Seattle could put up some runs against them. One guy who I really like, if he's in the lineup, is going to be Nelson Cruz. He did sit Sunday with a forearm injury, but he's a guy with a 456 WOBA, 330 ISO score against left-handed pitching. So you got to look his way whenever they face a lefty. Now, if he's not in the lineup, I think that's going to be where it becomes interesting on whether or not you want to use more. Left-handed bats have actually done okay against them, and that's basically what he's going to be seeing a lot of if Cruz is out. You obviously would like to have more righties in there, but they really don't have a lot of big righty bats other than Cruz. You're going to get guys like Cano and Seager and Lind. A couple of them are decent in lefty-on-lefty situations. Cano has 3 home runs in his last 2 games. He is 19 of his last 33 with 4 home runs overall. So this is a guy that's been swinging a pretty hot bat lately. And like I said, Moore hasn't been lights out the lefties. So I think Cano is still in play either way. Maybe even a guy like Kyle Seager you can look at. But if Cruz is out of this lineup, I think it becomes a much softer lineup for Moore to go up against. And I would kind of tick him up a little bit accordingly. Last game on the night, Toronto going up against San Francisco. We got Aaron Sanchez on the mound here. I think Sanchez is in a good spot for a win. In 2015, left-handed bats were really the way to go after him. They had a 282 batting average, 171 whip, 9 home runs in 45 innings. So basically 1 every 5 innings. A guy like Denard Span, 377 WOBA, 143 ISO. Panic might be hitting in the 2-hole, 360 WOBA, 167 ISO. Brandon Belt, who's been having a really good year, 368 ISO, 368 WOBA, 197 ISO. The left-handed bats is how I'd want to go up against Sanchez. That's where he struggles. But again, he's getting a park bump as he leaves Toronto to go to pitch in San Francisco here. And I think he can put up a pretty good start and has a really good chance for a win because he's going up opposite of Jake Peavy. And Jake Peavy got lit up in his last 2 starts. I don't think either one of them he got out of the 4th inning. He's been a reverse splits guy since the beginning of 2015. So right-handed bats have been hitting better against him. 271 batting average, 123 whip. You look at guys like Joey Batista, 391 WOBA, 298 ISO, even though he's been a little bit cold this year. Donaldson's been mashing 387 WOBA, 258 ISO. He's fine. I would no problem rolling him out there in cash or GPPs. And then even a guy like Edwin Encarnacion, 381 WOBA, 267 ISO against the right-handed pitching. Like we said, PV being a reverse splits guy, the right-handers have been doing better against them. I got no problem looking at that way either. So I do think that some of these big bets on Toronto are in a pretty good spot here. I expect Toronto to light up, PV today. Unfortunately, it looks like PV is a little bit over the hill. So at this point, I would have absolutely no problem taking Toronto bats. I think they actually make a sneaky stack, although I would much rather if this game was in Toronto instead of San Francisco. San Francisco, not really a greatest hitter's park, not really a place that we want to target a lot of guys. So that wraps it up for the 14 games on the slate here today. Thank you guys for joining us at rotocurve.com for the Benny's Bats section. And as always, stay classy, DFS.